Welcome to Straightforward, a podcast about Taiwan, the island at the center of technological innovation and the global fight for democracy. I'm your host, Channing Lee, and Happy New Year. Welcome back to the Straightforward studio. We're really excited for another year of amazing content all about Taiwan, and thanks so much for tuning back in. Now, before we get into today's episode, there's actually been a lot that happened in the Taiwan space, in Taiwan, around Taiwan, in the U.S.-Taiwan space over the last few weeks. While many of us were perhaps resting, spending some time with family during the holidays, they definitely kept things pretty busy over there in Taiwan. So before we get into the conversation, I do want to highlight some of the major news items that had happened over the last few weeks. For example, shortly before Christmas, actually here in Washington, we announced an $11 billion arms package for Taiwan. This is really exciting because it was the largest ever U.S. weapons package that's ever been announced. $11 billion, that's not a small number. And of course, this reignited some reaction from across the strait. At first, Beijing, expressed their typical anger at a sale of this kind. But a couple weeks later, shortly before New Year's, they actually carried out unannounced their Justice Mission 2025. This was kind of a series of military drills that simulated a blockade, of course, air and sea operations as well, involved their entire military, their army, navy, Air Force, Rocket Force. They were showcasing their stealth fighters, their destroyers, missile launchers, all their features. Really a show of military power in the Taiwan Strait, specifically, of course, aimed at reacting to this arms package. Now, this is the 8th major military drill that the PLA has conducted around the Taiwan Strait since then. U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in August 2022. This one was different because it was not previously announced. It happened. They later announced that they had successfully completed their drills. In the past, right, they would announce that this was happening. For example, the joint sword drills that happened earlier last year. But this time it was completely unannounced. And it really goes to show how Beijing is trying to normalize a lot of this behavior. So definitely a dangerous start to the new year. But that's kind of not all that happened. On New Year's Eve, Xi Jinping made his annual New Year's Eve speech, and he really stressed the importance of unification with Taiwan as a priority, of course, for the Chinese Communist Party. He even used the word unstoppable, saying that unification was quote-unquote unstoppable. The following day, on January 1st, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te made his New Year's address, reiterating that the priorities of his administration are to make sure there is a safer and more resilient Taiwan. So certainly an eventful start to 2026. For today's episode, I wanted to bring in a couple of experts here based in Washington who can talk a little bit about the predictions for 2026 from a U.S. perspective, of course, on the situation in Taiwan. They happen to be the chair and vice chair of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, which is a congressional commission looking at China and their power and their growth. The commission just happened to release their 2025 annual report in November of last year, so a couple of months ago. And they have a chapter in there specifically about Taiwan. So we had a conversation in mid-December about kind of what that chapter entailed, what are the recommendations that they had or they made to the U.S. Congress. And of course, because they are experts in their fields, I picked their brains on kind of 2026 and predictions, outlook, all the fun stuff. So first we have Randy Shriver. He is the chair of the U.S.-China Commission. He wears lots of hats, though. He is also the chairman of the board of the Institute for Indo-Pacific Studies. He is also the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. Secondly, we have Mike Kuiken. He is vice chair of the China Commission. He's also spent 23 years in the Senate, most recently as the National Security Advisor to Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Randy, Mike, thank you so much for joining us here at Straightforward. Welcome back to the SCSP office. I know you're good friends of us, but always good to see you. So thanks for coming in.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Those who know SCSP should already know some of your backgrounds, but for the straightforward audience, you might be new. So I'm hoping if you can just start with some brief introductions on your experience working in government, and particularly also, since we're going to talk about the Commission's work, why you're serving on the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. Maybe, Randy, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, I have a background in East Asia, both in government and in private sector work, and to the extent I have academic work there as well. I studied Mandarin Chinese back in 1986, so I dare say early adopter, yes. And I've served in the military and Navy intelligence, served in government, several tours. I was at the Office of the Secretary of Defense in the mid-'90s in the Clinton administration. I was the Taiwan desk officer during the 95-96 Taiwan crisis. I served at the State Department 2001 to 2005, including as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia. And last tour in government, I was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security. China, Taiwan, always really central to the portfolios I've worked in government. I was fortunate after leaving DOD to be asked to serve on this commission. Senator McConnell, really primarily through his national security advisor, Robert Karam at the time, asked me to become a commissioner, and was glad to take it up because I'd followed the commission's work for a long time. It's one of the older commissions dating back to 2001, and had always been really impressed with the work of the commission and really was anxious to have an opportunity to contribute in more direct ways.
Well, thank you for your service and in all the many ways. But yeah, thanks for being here as well.
My pleasure.
Mike, also, fascinating background. You've done a lot of work also with us here at SCSP. Can you give us a quick, brief overview of that?
Thanks, Jenny. 23 years in the U.S. Senate. I did 12 and a half on the Senate Armed Services Committee under late Senator Carl Levin, and 2 years under Senator Jack Reed's leadership. After leaving the Armed Services Committee, I was lucky enough to join Leader Schumer on his first day as the Democratic leader in 2017. Spent 7.5 years there. Wrapped up in May 2024, about a little over a year ago, or 18 months ago, and joined the commission right after I left government. It's been an incredible opportunity, and really enjoy the work. We get good bipartisanship. Randy's been a good partner, as all my other Republican colleagues, and it's a fantastic place.
Thank you also for your service. Congratulations on publishing this report. I know it was back in November, right, when the report was published, but obviously there's so much in there, obviously a lot about China, but there is a chapter on Taiwan. I want you to first help us set the stage for our conversation about that Taiwan chapter, right? You say it's a critical period, a critical window of opportunity. You're also saying that that window of opportunity for deterrence, for defense is closing. What do you mean? Why now?
Well, we know that Xi Jinping identified 2027 as the year for the PLA to be ready, not a go date, but to be ready by. And what we've observed is they're making fast progress across many domains that are relevant to a potential attack, so space, aircraft, surface, subsurface, missiles, etc. So we believe, they are doing their utmost to meet Xi Jinping's goals. We also see opportunities with Taiwan, with a new special budget being introduced, a willingness on the part of the United States government to engage in activities such as military training, which was taboo for a long time. So it's an important period, and we think there's opportunities to lock some things in with Taiwan that would really bolster deterrence and give the PLA and hopefully the CCP pause as they're reaching that date, that goal that they set for themselves.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We're, I guess, 1 year away. In January, we'll be 1 year away from 2027.
The 6-year Davidson window, we're down to a year.
Randy always has this riff that I thought he was going to do again, which is the moving from exercise to rehearsal. And we've really seen that over the last 18 months. And Chinese military activity, paramilitary activity, and alleged fisherman activity has been, on the rise. And so, they are actively trying to sort of boil the frog and move the status quo. And we're seeing that happen every day play out. And the commission always has a chapter on this because we're trying to keep a spotlight on this issue and sort of document what's actually happening, how things have changed over the years, and telling that story.
Okay, I really want you to expand upon that piece because I was actually going to ask you, right? This is a report about China. You have how many chapters? A lot of chapters, right? 12 chapters, I think, right? Each detailing a different aspect of China's economy, their relations in Southeast Asia, obviously their military. So you have a very expansive overview of what China has done over the year. And also, I was actually just talking with a colleague recently, and she was saying that the USCC actually has always done a good job of calling out all that China's doing, maybe 10 years before other people are paying attention. So a good reason for our listeners to go read the report and find out for yourself what's going on. But, going back to the Taiwan piece, why is there a Taiwan chapter? I know you kind of answered it, but why maybe, especially this year, right, Randy, as you mentioned, in 2026, is it so important that you have such a long, detailed chapter on Taiwan?
Well, the short answer is it's mandated that among the topics that the Congress has asked us to cover annually, Taiwan is among them. We have some discretion on other topics, and so special subjects such as space, we had a axis of autocracy hearing and chapter. Those are more at our discretion based on what we think is important, undercovered, et cetera. But the longer answer is there's plenty of material. The Chinese are ramping up coercion. They are really actively trying to cause Taiwan to doubt our resolve and call into question American commitment. On our side, we're seeing greater interest among allies and partners, so Japan, the Philippines, even Korea. So we always have plenty of material to cover, and the Chinese keep it sporty at best.
Maybe they do all this so you can write it in a report.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
The only thing I would pile on there is, one of the things that I'm sure we'll get to later in the conversation is Taiwan plays a vital role in our economy, the American economy, whether it's, the chips that we talk about every time we talk about AI, or the legacy chips that are, probably in these microphones that we're talking into right now, all the devices in this room in our cars. And so Taiwan's role in the American economy is incredible. And so keeping a bright light shining on their role in the American economy and sort of the importance of all the things they do is critical.
It's actually our 6th largest destination for agricultural products, which is astounding when you think of an island of 23 million people. Number 6 counts in the scheme of things. And I would also point out the new national security strategy, an unusual document for that kind of document. It identifies Taiwan as being important not only because of semiconductors, which it notes, but that it's key geography. It separates Northeast Asia from Southeast Asia. It's adjacent to the South China Sea. It's the gateway to the Pacific, second island chain as part of the critical first island chain. So even in this document, which has some very unorthodox things in it, really puts Taiwan at the center of our interest in the Indo-Pacific.
I'm really glad you said that. I want to come back to it toward the end when we're going to discuss kind of our outlook for 2026.
Sure.
But thank you for that. So just to go back to the Taiwan chapter, give me a summary, right? What are the key points this year that you've highlighted in your report? I know there's a lot on the economy. I was really happy to see that, right? Just like you said, you also have some recommendations, but you also, of course, have a huge section about China's different coercive actions, against Taiwan, both directed at Taiwan, but also, around the world. So can you just give me, what's the high-level summary, kind of the pitch for this chapter? Maybe Mike, we'll start with you.
No, definitely start with Randy. The time.
Well, when you hear Xi Jinping say something like the great national rejuvenization project can't be fulfilled or completed without what they call reunification with Taiwan, what you're seeing play out in real time is a strategy aimed toward those ends. And it's a comprehensive strategy, so part of it is military coercion and pressure, part of it is diplomatic isolation, part of it is economic coercion and dependency, part of it is lawfare, and we're seeing all of it. And so for deterrence purposes, we need to think creatively beyond just the military piece, I would argue, and I think our commission has argued in terms of the recommendations we put forward. But we're really seeing a comprehensive and very robust effort to try to reach that end state that Xi Jinping and the CCP have identified.
You talk about the show your homework recommendation.
I'd be happy to. Would you like to hear about some of our recommendations?
Sure. So there are 3 main recommendations for the report, right? I guess I could guess which one of those is show your homework, but do you want to walk us through the 3 recommendations?
Sure.
I like this recommendation because when Randy pitched it to me, he called it the show my homework section, and I think I was literally sitting with my son doing his homework with him. So it was sort of an amusing pitch.
Well, as many of us have observed, people are familiar that there is a Taiwan Relations Act, and they're usually familiar with the portion about arms sales because those are sort of the high-profile activities undertaken in accordance with the Taiwan Relations Act. But there's another very important part of it. The U.S. must maintain the capacity to resist force if asked to do so by national command authority. And to our knowledge, the Indo-PACOM commander has never been asked to prove it. And we do have the unfunded priorities list that Indo-PACOM puts out every year to say, here's the stuff I want but didn't get. But in this case, it's tied to a legal mandate. And if Indo-PACOM is not in compliance with the law, they need to be able to go to Congress and say, here's what I need to fulfill the law, not just here's a wish list. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that, although you're not a big fan of the unfunded priorities list, I think.
Right.
No comment. But this ties it to a legal requirement. We also added in the recommendation that some consideration should be given to opportunistic aggression simultaneous to operations against Taiwan. So what if North Korea moved against South Korea while a Taiwan contingency was unfolding? And our goal is not to necessarily put somebody unfairly under the spotlight, but to really give them the chance to say, if I truly am out of compliance with the law, here's what I need to be in compliance.
So an opportunity.
Right,
to request more resources.
Yeah.
And it really just sort of drags the thread across the whole chapter, which is to the recommendations, which is if we're moving from exercise to rehearsal, like I said earlier, and we're a year away come January 1st, we need to think about this in a really urgent and thoughtful way and make sure that we're resourcing the department in a way that does ensure that they can sort of accomplish the task that they've been given.
And it's really good to see. I was very happy to see that, the specific addition of Indo-PACOM, hopefully it is viewed as an opportunity. The second recommendation, right, is more about the State Department and foreign military sales. Can you speak on that as well?
Well, one of the, I think, key pillars of our ability to defend Taiwan, if the political decision was made to do so, is to be postured optimally to do that. We're a distant power, and we're reliant on friends, allies, partners for access and basing and overflight. And largely because of a legacy of World War II and the Korean War, we're heavily concentrated in really two places, Japan and Korea.
Yes.
And really, even within those places, we're concentrated in smaller sub-elements of those countries. So we're very concentrated in Okinawa. Okinawa was fine in proximity, but Southwest Island chains even closer to the Miyako Strait and the main island of Taiwan. Look to the south, northern Luzon area of the Philippines, Palawan, close to the southern part of Taiwan. So the idea that has already been introduced is that we need access and we need to develop facilities for possible U.S. military use. So the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, ECTA, in the Philippines has these sites that we are authorized to build out and pre-position material for now mostly humanitarian goods. Similar initiatives in the Southwest Island chain. But if you spend any time there, this is coming along very slowly. Part of the reason is they've been relying on what's called MILCON, military construction budgets. Very hard to get members of Congress to say what I want to do with my MILCON is spend it in another country.
Yeah.
There are other arguments about color of money, which service is responsible for which ECTA site, Southwest Island chain, what the Japanese are willing to contribute versus what they expect from the U.S. This is all subject to negotiation. So our idea was that Taiwan could open up an FMS case with the State Department and not buy weapons, not invest in training, but put money into a fund that could then be used for the build-out of these critical sites. When said out loud and talked about publicly, it's made some people uncomfortable in the Philippines. It's made some people uncomfortable in Taiwan, quite frankly. But we're a public body. We recommend to Congress, which is a very public institution. If they take us up on this recommendation, my assumption would be this goes where properly belongs, which is in private discussions. But the idea is these access points are critical for Taiwan's defense and therefore critical for deterrence. Why shouldn't Taiwan be contributing directly, financially, materially to them?
Yeah.
The idea is new to the Indo-PACOM AOR, but it is something that the Department of Defense and the Department of State have used in CENTCOM AOR. So it's not an entirely new idea. So it's taking sort of a lesson learned from one AOR and applying it to another. So our partners in the CENTCOM AOR have done something similar, and so it's a good idea. And I hope it gets some traction.
Yeah, you mentioned, Japan and the Philippines and others, even in Taiwan, perhaps not being extremely thrilled about this. Can you explain what are the reactions that you've gotten, right, when you're naming other countries in this recommendation?
So I would say it slightly differently. I think it's an awkward discussion to have in public. When the people that I've
That's
briefed
true.
privately have been quite enthusiastic. And I think they understand the direct tie to investments in these sites and deterrence.
Yeah.
When broadcast publicly, it brings in some complications where the Chinese could potentially put pressure on the Philippines to not accept money from this fund. People in Taiwan might ask, their big move is to do everything indigenously and locally.
Yeah.
Why are we spending money outside our country? So it's out there. We hope they take up the recommendation, but from this point forward, it should probably be G to G, relatively quiet, low-key discussions.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the best way to do something like this, especially when it comes to Taiwan. And Libby and I had talked a lot over the last year about, what it means to actually move policy forward when it comes to Taiwan, right? And sometimes it's not doing it out in the open. So I'm glad you bring that up. Okay, since we're talking about the recommendations, then I do want to go back and ask you some particular questions about different pieces of the report because it provides such a good assessment of what's going on in Taiwan. I was very happy. Number 3, Vatican-Taiwan relations. That's awesome. I keep saying I want to do a episode on the Vatican, my personal interest. I don't want to talk too much about it now, but why is this the third? That's like 33% of the recommendations, right? Number 3, you're recommending that the U.S. or the Congress needs to pass legislation. That's really, I think, ambitious, right? But legislation to affirm Vatican-Taiwan relations. Tell me about this. Why was that number 3?
Well, I guess we should point out that, we do a chapter every year on Taiwan, and we have recommendations every year on Taiwan, and we tend not to repeat them. So this is probably not the third most important thing we could be doing. But it is an area where we haven't addressed it in the past. It's also in reaction. We have a new pope.
Yes, an American pope.
It's very cool. He's from Chicago.
Yes, he is.
Doesn't put ketchup on hot dogs.
Baseball fan.
Baseball fan, exactly. All good stuff. But, these are, every time there's a change in the papacy, there's an attempt by the Chinese to say, you really should be on board with formal diplomatic relations with China because, 1.4 billion souls can be saved versus 23 million souls. And surely God would be happy with the larger number.
All created equally, but...
Yeah, exactly. So I think the timing is somewhat related to that. It's related to the fact that the Chinese have historically put pressure on the Vatican to switch diplomatic relations. They've really gotten hung up over things like selection of bishops and how much involvement Rome could have on the operations of the Catholic Church in China. Surely more recent incidents in Hong Kong, the imprisonment of Cardinal Zen as an example of that would give them some degree of pause. But we know it's a relentless campaign on the part of the Chinese. So our hope is that it would largely be symbolic. And, of course, these are decisions between the Vatican and Taiwan. But our hope is that some signaling from the United States Congress would help really stay the course in this diplomatic relationship. Taiwan is down to 11, 12?
11 plus the Holy See.
So 11, 12.
12.
Arguably, because of the unique nature of the Vatican as a diplomatic entity, it's Taiwan's most important remaining diplomatic partner, and should remain so.
The only other thing I'll just pile on Dr. Randy is he actually did an op-ed earlier this year on the Dalai Lama and his birthday. The willingness of the Chinese to enter into these religious institutions and try to leverage them as much as they can for their gain and to sort of achieve their ends for the Chinese Communist Party is extraordinary. It's something that Randy and I highlighted in this op-ed on the Dalai Lama, and the same thing is true with the Vatican.
Oh, absolutely. I could keep going on about this topic because it's actually a personal passion of mine too. But I'm glad you're drawing attention to that. And like I said, was really delighted to see that because it's new. And actually, now that you say it, it is very timely. So I hope all of our, Catholic audience out there, but just in general, those who are reading, I think it's a good signal. And, maybe Pope Leo will read because his name is in the report.
And if you go deeper on Taiwan, religious institutions really played a critical role in democratization and liberalization and end of the authoritarian rule. Probably more the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, but I think religious freedom has been really one of the hallmarks of Taiwan's success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do want to go back. So there's a large section in the report that talks about U.S. skepticism, but specifically what the CCP is doing to kind of fuel that flame. U.S. skepticism is a problem that we've seen, honestly, I think especially over the last year. A lot of narratives that maybe originate in Taiwan, right? About whether or not the U.S. is supportive of Taiwan, whether or not the U.S. will come and help Taiwan, et cetera. Those narratives could have very well actually stemmed from Taiwan itself, right? But then you've seen the CCP go in and now amplify those specific narratives. Tell me about this, right? How can the U.S. combat this? Should the U.S. play a role in this, right? It gets tricky, right, when we're talking about information, but, especially this is something that you've pointed out so clearly in the report. You've documented so many instances, and it's not just about amplifying narratives online. It's also about the ways that the Chinese Communist Party is inviting different members of Taiwan's parliament to visit the mainland, youth exchange, all of these things, right? Is there anything that the U.S. can do on that piece?
I would say, what Randy should chime in here, but the one thing that I would just articulate right off the top is we know one thing about the Chinese Communist Party is incredibly effective at entering into the information space, whether it is to control it or to manipulate it. And so that is undoubtedly a narrative here that we should never lose sight of, which is the Chinese have no problems entering into the U.S. political environment and trying to drive a wedge into our information space and to sort of make people pick sides or think they're picking sides or driving doubt into the system. And so I think, as we sort of have a conversation in this space, always remember how active the Chinese are on American social media and any other social media tool that they can gain access to.
And they're leveraging some, I would say, aspects of our policies that are ambiguous, in at least one instance, explicitly ambiguous,
yes.
Right? Strategic ambiguity. So it's a hard thing to combat to say, no, we're here for you. We're here for you. Will you come to our defense? Well, we're going to just leave that unanswered. So they have a tendency to leverage that and exploit that. Any incident, even if it's outside Taiwan, as they point to our withdrawal of Afghanistan and precipitous withdrawal. By the way, staying 20 years and then withdrawing is not exactly precipitous. It's like the very end was precipitous. Reluctance to go fuller into Ukraine and Ukraine's defense, et cetera. I think the new wrinkle is, we're hollowing out Taiwan's semiconductor industry.
Yes, exactly. And those narratives I also hear in Chinese language media in the United States, right? Yeah. It's the whole the U.S. is trying to pull TSMC out, and they're betraying you, they're leaving you behind. It actually circulates in Chinese language media here too, by the way. Yeah.
So as Mike was saying, they're extremely active in the information space. I think the United States needs to lean into its actual strengths. If we're not committed to Taiwan, look at our FDI in Taiwan. Look at the number of American expats and American citizens in Taiwan. Look at our track record. So from 1947 on, whether that was intervening with the 7th Fleet and during the early parts of the Korean War, whether that was the 57-58 island shelling campaign and the intelligence and logistics support we provided, whether that was 1996 and sending the 2 carriers to the area of the Taiwan Strait. So if the Chinese are going to try to persuade people that we're unreliable and we're not going to be there for Taiwan, they also have to deal with that history of very much being there when Taiwan was in need.
So I agree with you, but I just want to challenge you for the sake of challenging.
Sure.
The problem is, and I'll say this because I'm a young person, right? I don't remember any of that. And so if I'm just seeing on social media, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, the U.S. just abandoned Afghanistan. No memory of the 20 years or so that, you might say, hey, but we were there, right? Yeah. Same thing with Ukraine. We've actually been supporting them for a long time. But now any little incident, if I'm on my smartphone, I can just see, oh, you know what? Yeah, the U.S. doesn't support them. So that makes it more difficult, right?
Yeah. Well, for the record, I'm an old guy, but I don't remember 1957, 58 either.
That's not what I was implying.
So that was part of the end of my riff of leaning into our strengths. We have to make that history known, and we have to educate people alongside underscoring the other elements, our investment in Taiwan, our the comment earlier about Taiwan being our 6th largest destination for agricultural products. We just made a huge deal about more soybeans to China. That may or may not come to fruition, or that may come to fruition and then later be cut off. Yeah. Taiwan has been there as a partner in this area for a long time. Our farmers rely greatly on Taiwan as they do China at very close to the same levels. even though the population is much smaller. So we just need a better approach to telling our own story and leaning into these strengths. At the end of the day, we do have a policy with some ambiguity in it, and I don't see that changing. So that means we've got to be vigilant because the Chinese will continue to try to exploit this and leverage this.
I think one of the things you could do, Channing, is start making some Instagram clips to start telling the stories.
Is this podcast not enough? No, but that's so true. And joking aside, actually is what we are trying to do, right? What we have been trying to do with this podcast and over the year, and hopefully in the new year, right, we'll continue to tell these stories. But yeah, at least one of us working on these.
For some 15-second Instagram.
Maybe I'll have to feature you in all those videos.
Well, if you have to.
Okay, I want to turn now also to the part about the economy, right? Because you've alluded to already, right? 6th largest trading partner, that's huge. I always say for agriculture, yes, for agriculture. But I always say, again, look at the size of Taiwan. You can fit 11 of those in California. You can fit like 6 of them in Maryland. I think we talked about this on our first episode. It's insane what they've accomplished economically, but it's also not just on semiconductors, right? So can you tell me, in your report, you talk about Taiwan's economy and why it's important to the U.S. Can you just explain that a little bit?
I can't remember if I put this line edit into the Taiwan chapter, but they're a manufacturing powerhouse. And sometimes we forget that. And it's manufacturing powerhouse from chips to intermediary goods to finished goods. And the sump pump in my house is made in Taiwan. I remember installing that sucker in the basement.
Nice.
I had no idea about a sump pump from Taiwan, which is great. So you're absolutely right. We sort of over-index and over-focus on the semiconductors, but the role that they play in a variety of ecosystems, again, from chips all the way to finished goods is incredible. The other thing that they do is, around the semiconductor ecosystem, there are all kinds of inputs that come into that. It's just not just the chip, and those chemicals and all those materials that feed into that industry come from Taiwan in a lot of cases. Yeah. And so whether they're going to Japan, or whether they're going to Korea or someplace else in the region, or to the United States, the sort of starting material for a lot of this stuff is Taiwan. So we sometimes don't appreciate just the role that they play in a variety of technology ecosystems.
Can I just quickly follow up? Are members of Congress aware of this? I don't say that to accuse them of not, but, I just think about, the average person just assumes everything's made in China, right? In a way, a lot of our goods, probably made in China. But if, the amount of production that Taiwan contributes to the world is as much as, you're alleging here in the report, like, why is this not talked about more?
We have a whole section on supply chains. If Commissioner Miller was here, he'd be jumping out of the seat right now to talk about it. But we don't really think about supply chains in a way that is sort of like unpacking the stack when we always talk about AI these days, right? We don't unpack the stack for intermediary goods or sump pumps like in the basement.
Just thinking about the final product.
Members definitely understand about the importance of the semiconductor industry, and that just doesn't mean chips, but all sort of the inputs that go into it. But they don't necessarily have the data that they need. Channeling Commissioner Miller at this point, the data that they need to sort of truly understand all the inputs that go into things, and really how much Taiwan does to help play in that story. Absolutely, there's an incredible amount of stuff that gets made in China, and it goes from washing machines to electronic vehicles. Right? So sometimes it's just about providing the data or creating some sort of authority for the government to get better visibility on the supply chains. I think I channeled.
Yeah, I think you did just fine. I think I would add to that. There is something else going on here, which is from 1979 until relatively recently. People preferred to keep Taiwan in a sort of low-key posture.
Yes, people as in Taiwan as well, right?
Yeah, and everybody was sort of trained to say, let's not rock the boat. If we have good commercial economic ties, let that be, and not stick our neck out too much for fear of China coming in and saying, you should really not be buying from them, or you really shouldn't be cooperating with. And everyone was sort of willing to accept those conditions for a long time. I think as the threats have grown against Taiwan, the balance has shifted, and people need to understand the value of Taiwan to the United States. I added that 6th was agriculture, but they're actually number 8 or 9 in overall volume of trade, which is still pretty significant. 8 or 9 counts. We're in volume a larger trading partner with Taiwan than India, than with Saudi Arabia. I mean, these
Yeah,
are countries that we talk a lot about the economic relationship or potential economic relationship in the case of India as driving a lot of our policies, but we've been less, forward-leaning when it comes to Taiwan for, I'm sure, understandable reasons at one point, but probably less relevant today.
Yeah, no, that's actually absolutely true. I think that tide is shifting a little bit. At least I've been talking about it very openly here, right? Because it is something worth drawing attention to at a time when people are like, why does Taiwan matter, right? So, no, that's really, really great. I do want to now turn our attention looking forward to 2026, right? New year. I actually, in preparation for this episode, I actually went back and listened to our very first episode with Ambassador Yu, which we recorded also kind of in the spirit of it's a new year. What are you looking forward to? He actually talked a lot about the double taxation bill, which unfortunately I don't think has actually progressed in the way that I know Taiwan would have liked to see. But just, first of all, 2026, what are you looking forward to for the U.S.-Taiwan relationship?
We've got to land a trade deal, and Taiwan is now sort of uncomfortably sitting out there without a framework. I mean, some of these deals that have been announced are really frameworks that still the fine print needs to be really determined. So that's really key. I think a lot of continuing the good work and accelerating it. So one of the more impressive initiatives in my professional lifetime has been the initiative to restart military training with Taiwan. I always look around when I mention it because we're not really supposed to talk about it a lot. But if you go to Taiwan, you see a lot of people with short hair and coming out of the physically fit short hair guys coming out of hotel rooms and stuff like that. So that has been wildly successful, and we should increase that. We should continue the work with our partners and allies that are adjacent to the Taiwan area. So I like to say we're on the right track. Taiwan is on the right track too with this special budget worth about $40 billion US dollars. Incredible when you consider. I mean, that's bigger than the baseline budget. It's amazing. So I usually say on the right track, but as the humorous Will Rogers says, even if you're on the right track, you can still get run over if you're not going fast enough. So.
That's true.
I mean, well, just nice. Aside from the military piece of it, I think we continue to focus on sort of the contributions that Taiwan makes to the American economy, and sort of continue to highlight those. And also, listen, I think you said it at some point, either on the show or when we were talking beforehand. Basically, January 1 is 365 days away from 2027. And so just making sure that we continue in the policy circles around Washington to talk about the urgency of action with respect to building Taiwan's capacity and being prepared for, when President Xi is going to make that decision.
I guess we should address the potential downsides, too. We have APEC is being hosted by China this year, next year, 2026. They've already said that they will not invite Taiwan. Or Chinese Taipei, I think, is the name under which they participate in APEC. There's a President Trump visit to Beijing in April and a potential reciprocal visit in the fall to the United States. Those could be good things. Those are also opportunities for China to try to extract some sort of concession or, there's a lot of talk about will declaratory policy change from the United States. So there's some potential perturbations there. We canceled a transit in 2025. Will we allow one in 2026? So, we've got to be sort of aware of where the downsides could be as well.
Yeah, no. Way to put up, I'm glad you bring that up.
Things.
No, I'm glad you bring.
Hopefully that's not the last question.
Not the last question. No.
Well, they won the Little League World Series this year, so we're looking for a repeat.
Good. Okay, I do want to ask a couple of more things before we do wrap up. Number one, though, 2027, right? I'm glad you brought that up, but how much do we believe that? I mean, I have my own opinions on this, but since I have the honor of hosting you both on the show, 2027, is that real? How worried should we actually be? Because 1 year away, it seems like this year or last year, 2025 flew by, but also it was very long, right? So a lot can happen in a year. What are we feeling 2027 and then, looking at 2035, 2049? At this point, is it even helpful to use dates? What do you think?
I mean, the simple answer is we don't know. I hate to start with the I don't know answer, but
it does give us sort of an opportunity to be thoughtful in terms of where things stand and what are the most urgent action items. And based on sort of what we've been told from public reports, is that it's a date to be ready. It's not a date to go. I think Randy's either said that again in the lead up to the show or on the show already. But the government always needs deadlines, right?
Yeah.
Needs a deadline to be thoughtful. So this is a perfect opportunity to sort of think about one and think about where we stand and where we are. And so whether or not it's real or fake or totally made up, it does give us a sort of North Star, a planning star to be thoughtful about.
I agree with that. It's real in the sense of a planning date and action forcing kind of marker out there. And it's been treated real on our side as well, by the way. When you visit INDOPACOM or you visit component commands, it won't take very long into a conversation before 2027 comes up. And they know their job is really to keep the peace, and the way to keep the peace in this environment as we approach 2027 is deterrence and to prove that you're prepared. And as I've heard multiple INDOPACOM commanders say, my job is for Xi Jinping to wake up in the morning and say, not today.
Yeah.
And then the next day, wake up again and say, not today. And just extend that as far as you can.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, if you just look at Chinese military spending and sort of build up capabilities, whether it's space, whether maritime environment or airborne capabilities, if 2027 is not real, then they're spending an awful lot of money to build up military capacity and in a pretty extraordinary way in all of the sort of various capability spaces. And, we highlight some of that work on the Commission's report on space. Chinese now assess that, or consider, I should say, space a warfighting domain. That's something that General Saltzman told us. He said Chinese capability in space is mind-boggling. I mean, Randy and I have met a lot of general officers and flag officers over the years. They generally don't use the word mind-boggling. So,
Their minds may not have been boggled before then.
But military spending is usually a fairly good indicator of how you are evaluating your geopolitical environment. And so, if we look at that spending, it's probably a good warning sign.
I could argue that it's also because China needs to build their economy. They need to provide jobs for their people. It's really convenient to build up your military sector when you're also trying to encourage people to be very nationalist.
Yeah, no,
could that be a counter argument?
Yeah, you're listening.
Maybe this is just a farce.
I mean, some of the coolest American innovations over the years have come out of the defense industrial complex. Right? So you're absolutely right, and it's also can be an innovation driver. Yeah, the American economy is where it is today because of the investments made during World War II and Vannevar Bush's sort of endless frontier. He created the National Science Foundation and all of this sort of academic ecosystem that we've been benefiting from today. And remember, Silicon Valley was the home of semiconductors and sort of related technologies because of Lockheed Martin and Lockheed Martin's role in the Stanford Business Park. So, I mean, it is truly a major economic driver. So your counterpoint is totally fair.
Just for the heck of it. But, okay, last couple of things I want to throw at you. National security strategy dropped recently. I guess by January it wouldn't have been as recent, but still, right, newer, fresher outlook that the administration has put forward. They actually, I think, in my opinion, really prioritized Taiwan in a way that I didn't see. Perhaps I didn't see coming as much as it was out there. It very much said Taiwan is priority, or deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, right, is a priority. How do you see that shaping the future of U.S. policy towards Taiwan? How is Congress also going to incorporate that into their thinking?
Sometimes it's a game related to what your expectations were, and I think there was concern that there might be a major adjustment on Taiwan, and I heard all kinds of crazy rumors before it dropped, and it comes out, and the Indo-Pacific portion looks kind of normal-ish, let's say. Yeah. Europe, not so much. Other places not even mentioned, but the Indo-Pacific looks like the section that could have been written in Trump 1. Talks about burden sharing, yes. Talks about the need for the United States to have access, yes. But your point, it really underscores the importance of Taiwan, the importance of deterrence. It's all there. And I think, the part that I'm probably most pleased about is that reaffirmation of alliances because, a lot of people thought this was going to be the time where we reprioritize Western Hemisphere, but also dump all of Asia's problems on our Asian partners. And, this administration in both the words of this strategic document, but I would argue also in action when President Trump meets with counterparts, it's not just finger wagging and you need to spend more and pay us more. It's, hey, we actually need you for shipbuilding. Hey, we actually need you for critical minerals. That was the case with Albanese's visit. That was the case when President Trump met with President Lee. And so it's encouraging that there seems to be a realization that our alliances and partnerships are actually mutually beneficial.
Yes.
And that's really the core of how we're going to tackle this China challenge.
The only thing I'm pile on is that I can't remember if this was someone on our side that said that one of the briefings we were at today or someone on the other side, Randy, but it does sort of pull a thread of the Biden administration.
I was about to say it could also be written under Biden.
Trump White House bristle a little bit, but this idea that economic security and national security are really intertwined is something that we're really starting to get our hands around. And I think it's something that we lost sight of after the Cold War. The sort of democratic order and our sort of intertwinedness between military security and economic security are something that we've lost sight of, and it's something I think people are reevaluating. Goes from supply chains on the civilian side to supply chains on the military side, and how we think about that. And there's lots of things that we could all comment on in it, but one of the things that it does pull forward and continue from Trump 1 through Biden to today is the sort of economic statecraft piece, how it can be thoughtful in that ecosystem. We might not agree on the tactics, techniques the Trump administration is using, but that thread is a common thread.
Oh, well said.
I'm glad you bring that up also because this is a big priority for Taiwan. They've been talking about economic security for so long before I think even us in Washington or we in Washington have been able to sound that alarm. So yeah, very, very good. All right. If we reconvened in a year, it would be the end of 2026. What would you have liked? I don't want to ask this in the same way I did the other one, but if we were to convene in a year, what is one thing that if that was achieved, you would have said it was a success?
Well, I'd like to get through the Xi Jinping meetings without any major concessions, and maybe, again, it's an expectation issue. Look, I think there's a lot of good discussion behind closed doors with Japan, with the Philippines, South Korea. I'd like to see a little more collective action in action. And, I think one obvious thing we should be doing with Japan is particularly as we get access opportunities in places like Yonaguni and Southwest Island chain is we need to start to not only think about what we would do in the event of a blockade or even a soft blockade, but start to demonstrate that we've got a plan to deal with it. So an exercise involving the United States and Japan on countering a blockade. Basically, let's show that we can create a corridor for safe passage from Geelong to Yonaguni. Just do it, and you don't have to say it's about any particular scenario, but everybody would get the message. So taking that very high-quality discussion behind closed doors and putting it into action.
I like that, action.
And I agree with what Randy said. That's got to get through those two meetings, which could go either way in terms of the dynamics and sort of the things that are happening around those events and leading up to each of them. I would also say, what's the status of the TSMC facility in Arizona? Is it up and running? What's the status of the facility in Japan, in Rapides, in Hokkaido? Where are we in the AI race at the end of next year? And then where are we in some of the other areas that we know are vital in sort of strategic economic cooperation space, quantum, biotech? Are we ahead? Are we behind? And sort of evaluating some of those spaces as we think about challenges going forward beyond 2027.
Awesome. So everything, I guess. A lot of work cut out for all of us in this space.
We're in Washington. We're supposed to worry all the time.
If you've watched our previous episodes, you know that we like to end the episodes with a Taiwan recommendation. I know, especially Randy, you've been to Taiwan so many times. We'd love to hear what is your Taiwan recommendation for our audience. It could be something, book, movie, food, anything that you'd like to recommend for our audience to get to know Taiwan better. I guess I'll start with you, Randy.
Mine's easy. Go there. Visit. I mean, it sells itself across all the things you mentioned, the people, the food, the culture. It's a place that works. It's a place that is worth preserving, at least in its current status, if not better. But I have experienced time and again when somebody visits Taiwan for the first time, particularly if they're a Chinahan and they've spent time in China and Beijing.
Right?
It's transformative.
Awesome.
Completely agree with that one. The only things I would add would be tea. Every time I go, I grab a bag of tea and drink it endlessly, and always love it.
That is a good recommendation. I hope to actually cover that topic at some point because that's a hidden gem for Taiwan. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on Straightforward. Thank you for being my first episode of the year and really setting the stage for all the work that we have to do in 2026, but also, of course, all the opportunities to come. So thank you again. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Channing. And thanks for letting us ring in the new year with you.
Happy New Year. Thank you again to Randy and Mike for joining me on the very first episode of Straightforward of the year. Perhaps my first solo episode as well, so thanks for joining me for that. We have a lot of exciting conversations coming up in 2026. Our team is actually going to be heading to Taipei soon, where we will be hosting our annual International Strategy Forum kickoff. It's our fellowship program for young leaders, and very, very excited to bring all the fellows to Taipei and have more conversations about Taiwan. So expect some content coming soon from Taiwan. For all of our listeners, it is the start to a new year. Please email us and let us know what kinds of conversations you would love to hear. We have an email, of course. You can contact us at straightforward@scsp.ai. That is straightforward@scsp.ai. And with that, we look straightforward to seeing you next time.